So there's this really tough question that keeps coming up, especially after a recent tragedy felt like a dark echo from the past. Does the ultimate punishment actually stop the worst kinds of crimes? Today, we're going to dig into the evidence and see what it really tells us.
All right, let's dive right in and talk about what's brought this whole debate roaring back to life. It's a pretty painful story that feels like history repeating itself, with a decade and one execution sitting right in the middle.
So picture this. Back in 2014, the country was just horrified by this random mass stabbing on the Taipei metro. The man responsible, Cheng Chie, was eventually executed for his crime in 2016. Then you fast forward to 2025, and it happens again. A chillingly similar attack by a man named Sheng Wen.
And that, right there, leads to the question that everyone started asking. And it seems so obvious, right? If we executed the first guy, if we used the most severe punishment possible, how on earth could this happen all over again?
So right after this 2025 attack, this question wasn't just a question anymore. It became the centerpiece of a really powerful argument that just took over the whole conversation about capital punishment. And here's the argument, plain and simple. Look, we executed Cheng Chi, and it didn't stop Cheng Wen. Therefore, the death penalty doesn't work. It has no deterrent effect. And you can see why that argument is so powerful. The evidence seems to be staring us right in the face from the headlines.
But hold on a second. Does it really make sense to judge an entire justice policy based on two of the absolute most extreme, tragic cases? I mean, focusing on outliers like that can be super misleading. To really understand what's going on, we need to look for broader evidence, not just the shocking headlines.
And believe it or not, that evidence comes from a totally unexpected place. A policy decision over in Italy, of all places, created this incredible accidental experiment for researchers to measure what punishment actually does in the real world.
This is what scientists get really excited about. They call it a natural experiment. It's when some real-world event, like a government changing a law, just by pure chance sets up the perfect conditions for a scientific study. It lets us see cause and effect in a way that's usually impossible.
Okay, so check this out. Back in 2006, Italy's prisons were massively overcrowded. To fix this, they passed a mass pardon, letting thousands of inmates out early. But, and this is the genius part for researchers, there was a catch, a huge one. If any of those released inmates committed another crime within 5 years, they'd have to serve their new sentence plus all the time they got off from the pardon. This set up a perfect test, because every single person had a different amount of extra punishment hanging over their head.
So, what happened next? What did the numbers actually show? Well, when researchers crunched all that data on who went back to crime and who stayed straight, they found something fascinating. Turns out deterrence isn't some simple on or off switch. It affects different kinds of people in totally different ways.
And here's the headline finding. Deterrence works. The data was crystal clear. For every single extra month of prison time an inmate was looking at if they messed up again, their chance of actually doing it dropped by 1.24%. This was a huge deal. It was real statistical proof that the threat of punishment changes behavior.
But, and this is a huge but, this is where things get really interesting and bring us right back to that case we started with. That deterrent effect, it wasn't the same for everybody, not even close.
This chart just lays it out perfectly. For the inmates who were in for lighter, less serious crimes, that threat of more jail time worked like a charm, a really strong deterrent. But for the serious, long-term criminals who were already serving heavy sentences, the effect was tiny, basically non-existent.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. For the most hardened criminals in this group, the ones already sentenced to more than 6 years, the threat of even more time behind bars just didn't move the needle. It didn't meaningfully change their behavior. It's almost like they become immune to the threat.
Okay, so let's connect the dots. What does this Italian experiment have to do with the debate we're having? Well, it suggests that by focusing only on whether the death penalty stops the next mass killer, we might be asking the completely wrong question. We might be missing the whole point of having a tough justice system.
And this brings us to this really big idea called structural deterrence. The whole concept here is that the main benefit of harsh sentences isn't about stopping that one person at the very end of a criminal career. It's about preventing thousands of other people from ever even starting down that path.
Okay, let's just walk through the logic. Step 1. We know from the Italian study that harsh penalties are really good at stopping people from committing smaller crimes. Step 2. That means fewer people are entering the criminal justice system to begin with. And step 3. If you have fewer low-level offenders, it's just simple math. You're going to have fewer people who eventually escalate into serious hardened criminals.
So you can think of the whole justice system like a giant filter. Its most important job isn't stopping the one person who makes it all the way to the end, who, as we've seen, might not care about punishment anyway. Its real value is in preventing thousands of others from ever getting into that system in the first place.
So now that we have this data-driven perspective, we can go back to that original emotional debate and see why a simple yes or no answer just doesn't cut it. The reality of crime and punishment is just way more complex than that.
You see, the debate we always have is stuck on that first question. Does it stop the worst of the worst? But what the evidence is telling us is that we should probably be asking a much bigger, more productive question. Does our system, as a whole, effectively reduce the total number of criminals from the very start?
All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the big takeaways? First, deterrence is real. Punishment works. But it's not one size fits all. It's super effective on low-level offenders, but not so much on the most hardened criminals. And that suggests the biggest value of a tough justice system might be in preventing criminal careers from ever taking off in the first place.
And that leaves us with one final, big question to think about. If we stop focusing only on that tiny tip of the iceberg, those rare extreme cases, and instead look at the entire base, the whole crime funnel, how does that totally change the way we search for solutions to create a safer society for everyone?